E, F, G, H, I.
Hello, hello. Please settle down. I'm looking at Ayla. I'm looking at Vlad. I'm looking at people in the back of the room. People milling on the staircase. Come down, please. Everybody else, come forward. I promise you it will be worth your time. Hi. So this panel is with people who had run their own pop-up cities in the past, like Switzerland, and have been doing a lot of thinking on what the permanent Zuitzerland hubs could look like in the future. So you've got Kyle, you've got Yesh, Chance, Veronica, and Victoria. And we will start by giving each of them a chance to introduce themselves very briefly. So they'll say what they do, what pop-up they had built, and that's what we will start with. Kyle, please.
Hello. All right. Hey, everyone. Yeah, I'm Kyle. So I have a early stage legal and scientific law studio. We have a firm in Prospera, and so we've been working with what used to be Vitalia, now it's Infinita. And the special economic zone is exciting because the law is polycentric, so we can do a lot of regulatory experiments. And so for me, as someone with a studio that's working on legal law, it's fantastic to be able to do so many iterations.
And maybe Kyle, say a little bit about Infinita, the pop-up, just a couple sentences.
Yeah, so the pop-up, so Prospera is the actual jurisdiction, and the first traction, high quality traction we've had is in biotech for regulation. FDA takes forever and all that. So Infinita, that was MiniCircle, that was the first company with that success. So Infinita is a way to double down on that success and scale. But next month we're having crypto cities as well. So it's a lot of Bitcoiners have founded it, and so that's a big part of it. So yeah, I would say so I have a lab there, make.diy, and we do biohacking. So people put DPIN in their bodies.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Yash, and I'm one of the 3 co-organizers of a Zuitzerland node in India. It's called Zuitzerland. No, it's not a Zuitzerland node for grandmoms. Grandma means village in many Indian languages. Like people have literally asked me that, so I'm just clarifying. Yeah, so we wanted to. So India is a very interesting place. I was born in India, and it has very interesting demographics, immense talent. Opportunities are not shared equally across the world. And when we were in Zuitzerland, we were thinking about how to bring such model into India, and maybe through that help innovation go forward, while having some concentration on the DAC technologies that we can help build in that node.
Thank you, Chance.
Hello, I'm Chance. I have not actually facilitated a pop-up, but I've been accused of being an amateur anthropologist at them. I have done around 160 interviews across 12 of them, so I've seen a few of them, you could say. What I'm currently working on is on mobility policy with Safety Wing, and another one which is more fun project, we'll say, is that the person who helped make the policy that allowed Prospera, he is this fantastic, interesting person named Bob Haywood, and I'm trying to make his archives of working on special economic zones for the last 50 years more public and accessible to people who are working on these things. And yeah, that's me.
Thanks. Veronica.
Hi, I'm Veronica. I became a Zuitzerland true believer in Montenegro, and then it's been an increasingly slide to it becoming my entire life, professionally and personally. Alongside Burns, we organized Zoo Village, Georgia last summer, which was an iteration of the Zuitzerland experiment where we tried to maintain what we identified were parts of the original experiment and then change a few variables, namely that we wanted there to be a clearer vision. So we were inspired from the DIAC article that came out later in 2023 and thought, all right, and I have it written here, defensive techno-optimism as civilizatory roadmap. And then on top of that, trust and trustworthiness as a basis for coordination and truth and truthfulness as cultural foundation. And to put that more practically, since our entry point into Zuzulu was via Rationality meetup that Vitalik had joined and then invited our entire group, we always felt that that was a bit of the role we were asked to play in the movement, was coming in not from one of the existing tribes or disciplines, but kind of from the outside, see humans trying to coordinate and then participate seriously. And so we brought in cognitive sovereignty, and we've tried to make that become canon throughout the movement. We were very happy to see, not only did we have an entire first week at Zoo Village, Georgia dedicated to it, then different subsequent iterations have brought that in, like Zuitzerland now, which I'm also full-time alongside Victoria. I'm now helping build here. And then there's upcoming experiments that have also started to bring in cognitive sovereignty. So that's
Thank you.
where I'll end.
Victoria, please.
Okay, quick segue over to me. So I think I'm part of the Switzerland team together with Veronica. I'm honored that she lets me to talk about Switzerland, because it's like a very team effort, and it's amazing to work with Ayla, Vlad, Alberto, Veronica, and everybody supporting here, everybody who came here. So huge thank you. For the panel in itself, I think, well, my first career was in government, and I saw how institutions are run and have been relatively, I left it pretty much traumatized and disillusioned. So what I started doing is like running real estates and building resorts and movement building for corporations, etc. So this is somehow how I ended up doing Switzerland. And so for this panel particularly, I will more focus on the perspective of what it actually means from the real estate side to do that and add that value there. So sorry for switching so many hats this morning, but just to make that clear.
Amazing. Okay, so next question for the whole panel is, why are you excited about permanent hubs? And what advice would you give to permanent hub founders? Who wants to start? Any takers? Maybe Chance, let's have you.
Yeah, I can start. I can start first. What really attracted me to Zuzulu, I had been studying the history of fraternal organizations, friendly societies, basically social infrastructure, and how people thrive. And it seemed to me that these looked like social tie generators, basically things that brought people together to create social ties. And a lot of our opportunities in life, a lot of the things that we love about life come from the people that we meet. And I think it really matters where the locations that help us meet people. So I come from a rural area in Canada. I'm fairly nerdy. That sort of thing is not particularly admired in rural areas. Someone else once asked me, why do you talk like a librarian? Then when I moved to the city, when I went to university, it was a completely different world. And when I first went to the Zuzulu event, I felt like that again, just surrounded by people who were very curious about life, and my kind of oddness as far as being super curious about things was encouraged, not pushed down. So I just think fundamentally locations that have that's extremely valuable. Another one that I've actually gotten from Kyle and other people in Prospera is this concept of safe harbors. So similar idea, you can imagine that around the world. There are people who, wherever their jurisdiction, they don't have opportunities, or they're not encouraged in those interests. They can go to these places, and I've seen this when I go to these in different places. They go to a place and they're suddenly surrounded by people that are saying, yeah, you can start a company, you can do that. Whereas parents or family or whatever might be like, no, absolutely, you should never do that. We don't do that. So I think that's just fundamentally really valuable.
Thank you, Chance. Who wants to go next? Yash. Why are you excited about permanent hubs, and what advice would you give to founders of hubs?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think before answering that, maybe just like my riff on permanent hubs would be, I think it's also important to think about how do we, like, this is very exciting, right? Like, we have these nodes where we can continue advancing different things, especially around the DIAC umbrella. But I think the way I think about it is mostly, I like to call it semi-permanent. I think it's also important to think about how can we apply the same DIAC principles into this physical thing that we're talking about today, right? I think it would be interesting. I'm not suggesting any solutions, just some open questions, because I don't have any solutions around, can we think about like a mesh network between these multiple hubs that are coming up in different places, which are self-sovereign, has their own thing, but at the same time has some sort of interdependency, right? So what I mean by interdependency is, can we have capital, talent, and other pieces sort of flow around each other across these hubs, right? And also maybe because I think like policy like changes or any regulatory changes can become affect any particular hub, and we would need to have very low cost of exit for these hubs for people to move, whether it's intellectual property or whether it's their projects and so on. So I think we have this open source movement which is already there. People working on a particular place can just move to the other one if there is something happening in the governance of a particular permanent hub. And maybe for investors too, I think they can think about it something like as an option set of like, you invest into one thing, but you also get the arbitrage among the other nodes. Another thing I would like to end with is maybe we can also think about a way, like I think Vitalik was talking about some improved city tokens or village tokens. Can we create something where we can also slash the behavior of, say, other nodes if there is, some things that affects everybody else? So yeah, those are my points. Happy to go into detail.
Thank you. Maybe, Kyle, you already have a permanent hub, right? You've got Prospera, then you've got Infinita, the pop-up. Do you want to talk about lessons from Prospera for permanent hubs?
Sure. Yeah, and actually, so my mom was an early Finn Horner, and we moved to Whidbey Island for Talking Circles. So intentional communities has, I'm second generation pursuing this, and Prosper is great because it has been there 10 years, and so there's this baseline community that when Infinita isn't around, it's still always going to have this. Well, it's their home, so it's not going to go away. So I think, at the core, actually, it's for a lot of us, there's an existential drive. Like we really have some deeper life purpose is why we're in these permanent hubs, and temporary hubs can do that to some extent, but they're also ephemeral. And so to leave our legacy and those those kind of, it's more spiritual reasons. I said before, the more profane reasons, which is as a legal engineer, I get to have a blue ocean to experiment with the law, and you can't really do that in anywhere other than these special economic zones. But the permanent nature of it, it tends to come down to our short time on Earth. What do we want to make of it?
Thank you.
Someone brought up cosmolocalism in the previous panel. I think without permanence of any sort, we're just building glorified retreat companies, all of us. It's not really a movement. It's nothing ambitious. And I think and I think we'll talk about it later in the panel of what role do pop-ups play. I think there's still some really massive value for having these ephemeral events that bring a lot of people to a place at one time. I've said a million times to probably everyone here that this is all an excuse just to get all of you guys, these brilliant people in one spot to start talking and building things. So ephemeral events can work very well because not everybody can move somewhere if you have family, etc. But permanent hubs can enable then anyone that is already local in those locations, or people that are willing to then move and build something local in that permanent spot, to build something generational, actually be working with the surrounding environment, ideally being positive sum for not only the local, then you're extracting out or transmitting out, not extracting, you're transmitting out to the global side, and then we're all running on the world computer, sharing our digital public goods. I mean, that's what I'm excited about. I think in echoing Chance, the best analogy is, I think, universities, or what if we were creating, the best version of what universities maybe have done in the past or could be right now with the technology, the people, the resources, then that's what I'm excited about and thought we were building from day one. And so I hope that we continue to do that and we don't fall into the easy outcome of profitable retreat companies.
Okay, maybe to Victoria. Victoria, you've had a chance now to be running a pop-up for about 3 weeks. How has that changed your views on, building permanent hubs? Do you still want to do it?
Yes, no, I'm not wavering like there. I'm very stubborn. But I think one thing that I will definitely continue thinking more than just those 3 weeks. I think those 3 weeks, we also have thought a lot in the run up to it about like where is housing going to be, etc. When we look towards a permanence, I think the question is much more like where will people meet and mingle? It's one of the lessons that we also heard from our host here in Laax, that in order that they became the hotspot for the freestyle movement, in freestyle in the sense of like sportive movement, they started with public spaces. So it was the public space, the public meeting point, the half pipe that drawed it. And at the same time, down in our village, it's that place in front of our co-working where we see all the kids and still or wannabe kids on their skateboards and bikes and so on. So I think it's something that I would give to every pop-up organizer or permanent hub builder of like, don't only think where people want to live, but particularly focus a lot on where they're going to mingle and meet.
Okay. Great. So moving on to the next question, Kyle, I think you'd be a good person to riff on Vitalik's tokenomics model that he presented in the keynote. What did you think?
Yeah, so we've been having some conversations about bonds, which to me, this is thinking about SAFTs. It's tokens are, well, what's the writ? What's the existing legal sophistication that we can compare it to? So yeah, I think bonds is the closest. And so far, the conversations I've had about bonds is in these pop-ups, maybe Switzerland will be different, but the rating is just too low for that. So then there's an equity with the tokens. If there's dividends going in, then that's more on the side of equity. But cities we don't want cities to be developed by equity if we can help it. That's one thought on tokens. Now tokens have a lot of different possibilities, but I suppose on the more computer science side of things, I think they can handle the chain of title aspect of ownership, but the beneficial aspects of ownership, which are way richer in the legal relationships between everyone, we'll have to do more than that. One thing I also note is that when we decentralize one dimension, that also then can concentrate and centralize another dimension. So money is a decentralizing of value. The value, say the value of these shoes or of this event, we can compare them because we now have, they're all each a certain amount of francs worth. And what we see then is there are individuals then that can have that value really, really concentrated. So I suppose the one thing I would add to tokens, riffing right now, is if we can add a vintage to each token. And we do have that with money. We have a certain date on the money. So that's not having any opinion on what we're going to do with that vintage, but we just say this particular token was issued at this particular time, and that might help give us a little bit more dynamics to work with. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reconciling this bond environment and what we're learning about how we need to include equity, at least in Prospera. And again, Prospera is a for-profit, so it doesn't make sense on risk assumption. I mean, the US I just saw was downgraded to AA1 today, so it's tough to be graded in a way that we can get this cheap capital, but we do need cheap capital because we need hundreds of millions of dollars to build cities. As Vitalik said, you need a huge front load of capital to start with. So yeah, tokens might be a way to hybridize. Lots of exploration I think we have to do. So it's a good start to have the conversation going in the direction of tokens, but it's daunting.
Okay. Would anybody else like to add anything to that on the subject of tokens, tokenomics?
I mean, I'm curious, maybe not riffing directly on the tokenomics of it, but from your experience in policy and governments, if, a lot of what we've discussed and discovered in probably all of our projects is how do we interface with governments and how are we explaining things? We've talked about calling things special innovation zones versus anything else. Oh, this is where innovation happens, right? So from your experience, does throwing in tokenomics on top make it potentially difficult in Switzerland or anything along those lines?
Okay, so very hard question. I think from my experience, and probably later in the afternoon, we have a real case example of it. From my experience working in government, what I realized, and so I have been a political staffer, and I had to deal with all the apparatus of doing the admin and the bureaucrats there. And there was already a mismatch between policymakers and politicians themselves, because just the needs and the values that they have, they're just competing. And I think we, as building permanent hubs, also have to be very conscious about who we have and what are the interests and needs that they need to hear from us. I don't think that starting to talk about tokens will scare them, but I think if we can manage to build a bridge of look, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, or yes, we are, but it doesn't mean that you lose all of the legitimacy and the work that you have done hasn't created value for millions of people. We're just trying to build something and experiment on something that can add potential more value, and there will be a way of where you as a government, you as a administrative person dealing with taxes for the finance ministry or whatever, be part of that value creation, then that I think that's the narrative that we have to figure out, how is the framing? I don't have a clear answer for that, but I think it's also institutions, there are inside institutions are people, and so I think we need to understand what are they afraid of and what are they excited about, and hopefully we run into the right people while building the hubs.
Thank you. Yash, coming back to you, what role do you see pop-ups playing in the Zuitzerland ecosystem going forward? Are you planning to organize another Zoogramma? And if not, why not?
Okay. Yeah, I think we would be organizing one too, thinking more in terms of how does this long-term structure look like? And I think there are a lot of lessons and interactions here that have helped my thinking. I mainly see it having as three core pillars. So one is co-living, the second is co-building, and the third is co-learning. I think that's what it would solve, probably a mix of a university plus an accelerator. At the same time, while we're talking about all of this, I think it's also important to take a step back and think about, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And if this is the correct solution set that would actually solve that problem effectively. I think in co-living, there has been enough examples, having done Zoogramma, having been other places, and Shant was saying about this magical movement that he saw in Zuzalu. I had this one personal anecdote that I had was, one of the members who was at Zoogramma for very few days, right, was working in biosecurity policy space, and he mentioned he actually misses Zoogramma, being a part of a top tier institute in India, right? So I think that was okay, even in places like that, there is a need for having interesting, motivated people thinking about hard challenges and doing ambitious things and challenging the frontier of it. And under the co-building piece, I think we need to think about what are we building and why are we building it. I think the DIAC, a meme, gives us a good starting point. I think the next step would be to identify what is the most urgent thing we need to solve in this DIAC tech tree, and look at that and have one of those things come and build at that long-term location, either in one of these places. And my hope is that we can have multiple such efforts in different permanent nodes, and all of them can have a shared sort of acceleration towards moving that technology forward.
Thank you. I'm going to put you on the spot, Veronica. When is the second Zuitzerland pop-up happening? Yes, if it is happening.
Yeah, hopefully we become permanent sooner than later. I mean, we don't have any plans, and we were quite explicit, or I especially was advocating for us like defining as little as possible before May, since the goal was bringing people together and to be defining it. And so the we don't have plans yet of when the next one is. I think we're going to can once we have, I mean, it depends, like, if we have a permanent spot already this year that we can already do some type of pop-up and seating, then maybe there's something this year. It's really going to depend on the permanent location planning and strategy. I think, as I mentioned before, I think pop-ups, they can be very valuable to seed population, and we saw that in also in Prospera with Italia and then Infinita and seeding something. It's at the same time, and I've spoken about this before, where we had this offsite, this co-design offsite in September in Interlaken. And originally, Zuitzerland, before I joined the team, Zuitzerland was planning on doing a pop-up then. And so it was because of logistical like difficulties that then it turned into, all right, lower cost, shorter amount of time, let's co-design it for these 10 days. And then I just joined as a participant, got Switzerland pilled there. But I've spoken that it was a kind of happy accident that it seeded a lot of these champions for the movement, that they were excited. We started to explore the questions already back then, half a year before now, when we did the pop-up TM of this year, or Genesis Village, as we sometimes call it, which I like a bit better. But it's just semantics. We spend too much time on semantics in this movement. And so maybe it's worth saying, even if we don't have some permanent spot for sure by the end of this year, maybe these types of activations are quite valuable. I think we even saw that in 2023 with before the decentralization TM of Zuzulu, where we had ZooConnect, which was, however you want to define it, it was another iteration, it was a spin-off, it was a group of people coming together saying, let's do this again before it's too late, before like everything fizzles out. And there were a number of results from that moment, but at least it did bring everybody together. And so maybe Switzerland should have some type of pop-up activation sooner than later, independent of the search for the permanent hub. But probably the next big thing will be, we have a spot, let's bring people here to this spot. If I had to guess, but I'm just one
Thank
voice
you.
of many.
So we're running out of time, but give me a hand up if you'd like, if you've got a burning question that you'd like to ask one of the panelists.
Maybe I can speak real quick more to tokens. So one aspect of tokens that is really helpful right now is utilities and other flow states in Prospera at least. So we have a tower now, and there's also Frontier Tower that not as much experimentation because it isn't a special economic zone, but ultimately, yeah, it's about so when Vitalik brought up tokens, at least when I saw it, it was more tokens on the like funding side of things, like static tokens ultimately. But to track, how much water people are using, how much electricity people are using, and then that can also have a profit margin. And those are the more high risk tokens. And then we can have tranches to bubble up to tokens that are much lower risk. So yeah, so I just wanted to add that. That's the area where we can right now, I think, do token experimentation, and it's not daunting.
Lisa, can we have a question from the back?
Hey, I know you guys, especially the ladies on the right, have a lot of experience hosting network states and these types of events. From your sort of experience and what you've done so far and what needs to be done, what is the sort of roadmap of development towards more integration with local communities when you run an event such as this? Maybe on the top of the mountain is a little bit more separated, but generally a lot of the pop-up cities are in locales. What stage of development do we have to go through to have the foundations here, and then we can start doing better integrations locally?
One area that I'll quickly respond to that. So back in Montenegro alongside like Gary, Tomeo, and other folks, just as residents, we by week 2, we built a partnership with a local university. And then week 3, we brought a bunch of Zuitzerlands there. And then like a bit later, like the students came to us. And so that was all just in real time. And I think anyone doing any project to start reaching out to student groups as soon as possible. This time around, Switzerland, and thanks to Alberto on the team, also an alum from EPFL, the Blockchain Student Association, like the student group from that university has been co-curating. They played a massive role in organizing this pop-up and building Switzerland for months and months before this began. And I think even just from the Montenegro versus now Switzerland experience, I can see the massive difference of having students that are very keen about the project, about the different themes for it, helping design it, because then we made sure that makes sure that the experience is suited for them. They're not representative of every different type of demographic. You know, ultimately, you'd want to bring in more families, and some other projects maybe Chance can speak to that have done better at bringing lots of families in. You need like critical mass really to do that. But I think student groups is a really fantastic starting point, and huge shout out to BSA boys. Thank you for supporting us so much.
One last thing, maybe just on that the summit is isolated. We are only up here a day. For the rest of the time, we're in the village, living with others. People from the team and outside is joining the open source orchestra, joining our community kitchen, organizing sessions like walks where we can explore the architecture. Shout out to like some of the work that has been done here. So just on that, like we're not isolated up here usually. It's today.
Thank you. I just about today, so that's all I know. But my question is more, there's like timelines to organizing these events, right? You have to sort of do it months in advance. At what stage in those development timelines is the optimal time to bring in co-creation with local people? Like,
you have the idea to do it.
Yeah.
Like I think I feel strongly about that. I've already set that precedent. Like, what are we doing if we're not starting from there?
Yeah.
So I think if you're not local, like if you're starting a project and you are coming from the location, and I mean Una and Ayla both live here, right? And so they have strong local connections to begin with, and then built up a team of various people that live here, etc. But even especially if you're coming from the outside, or like when we were asked to organize Georgia last year, one of the first things was, okay, we need local support, let alone people that are going to help design and create, where it's in their interest for there to be a permanent hub or some long-lasting impact. So I would never don't wait a second to connect with local groups if you want to do any project like this.
Do we have any final questions? You do. Okay, Eliza, please.
Okay. So, yeah, I was thinking about like the concept of connecting permanent hubs. So I would like to see from your perspective, how do you envision the connection among these permanent hubs happening in real life? Like I feel like the concept itself is really powerful.
There's many ways this can happen. It already does happen to some extent. Like it is a dense network of people that are friends and have met through. There are other things like there are town halls that connect certain people. There are a lot of things along those lines. I think broadly that's something that has to be pushed on more. And I think to push back a little bit on Alex Taka when he spoke on this, I agree broadly that these groups can coordinate to do very practical win-wins. Where I disagree is I don't think 200 people, you're not going to get a passport with 200 people unless he's the one doing it. If it's just 200 people, that's not going to do it. If you have a much larger group of people and you have new functionality. So I think coordination is really important. Or another concrete example that stood out is going around these is, let's say, take DeSci, for example. DeSci, you find DeSci, all of these, one is kind of a core pillar in this community. Then you go to Prosper and you have an actual lab there, they're doing really interesting stuff. And you interview the people doing the lab, they're like, we need more people that are using this. And then you interview people, these other ones, they're like, where do I find the DeSci people? Where do I find that? So I think there's some like very simple coordination failures that are happening. I think that should be taken a lot more seriously. And I think people should think more clearly, like, what do we actually have to bring to the table with this X number of people? And then what do we have to have this number of people? And yeah, so think it's an open problem, but there is stuff happening for sure.
Charter flights. That'd be kind of fun. Yeah. If we have enough of us, it would actually be cost effective.
Supersonic is here to prosper. Make it easier.
And then also a portal. I like New York, London. They had a portal where it's a mirror, and it's really easy. So in like Makerspace, for instance, like the Frontier Makerspace, we tried to get that here, but it was a little bit much of a lift. We already have quite a bit of cross pollination, as you were saying, which is really nice. And then I forget there's a third one I want to do, but yeah, I already have some ideas we can talk later.
Okay, unless anybody has got like a really burning statement they'd like to make at the end and 2 or 3 sentences,
Yeah.
let's end this now and have lunch. Veronica.
If I can give it like a sentence, like we've had so much fighting since the start of Zulu, and it's like to be expected because there have been so many zero-sum games, and then just all these tribes and all these things. But on this note, like we're not the enemy of each other. If we're not working together and trying to coordinate, then we're going to lose ultimately. And so I think the coordination, coalition building, like avoiding global governance, because that is where the zero-sum these games are happening. But between the projects, we need to be working together and recognize that ultimately, I think we are trying to do very similar or parallel things, and there are ways we can coordinate. There's alignment, even if political or individual preferences are different. There's something deeper there, and we can't forget that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let's get lunch.